Thank you so much and welcome to Level 3's webinar series. I really appreciate you guys taking the time during your lunchtime to join us. For some of you who don't know what Level 3 is, we are an ecosystem builder. We build communities of interest. We connect startups to corporates. We have over 60 startups at our physical space where people sit, where the whole team sits. Sometimes you can't come and go. Cameron is one of our startups, and we first met them because they had just started their conversations with Unilever. And the more they worked with them, they realized how amazing the space and the connectivity was, and the proximity to Unilever was. And that is what we are always trying to do. We're trying to connect people to bring opportunities to our startups to grow and expand. If you do have any queries about Level 3, please feel free to email us. Today, Camden's going to, this is the part 2 of the series. He's going to talk about leadership and IQ in how do you motivate your teams during these crises. And in any time, I found the last session very, very useful. It's very applicable to everybody in terms of how do you manage teams, but then how do you also manage your bosses and how do you work with them better? How do you understand things from their perspective? But I won't say more because I'm not the expert. I'll let Cameron do. But before that, just a couple of house rules. Keep the questions and questions coming in. You can do that in the Q&A section, or you can just put it in the chat itself. This platform works better on Chrome, so try doing that. If you do have any technical issues, please do just put it in the chat and we should be able to support you. I've got Azra, my fantastic colleague, who does a great job of managing the platform in the back end. So thank you so much to Azra on that. So yeah, keep it interactive, and I hope this is useful for you. Over to you, Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you, Upna. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be back. This is the second webinar in a series of 3. We'll have another one same time next week. So this one, the overall background of the course of the webinar series is to look at the role of leadership in Agile, or the journey to Agile, or Agile organizations. And this one is going to look at one aspect of it, which is the importance of emotional intelligence. Okay, so I'm going to start off just with a little poll. I'll start polling it there. It should come up in front of you. And I just want to see what the audience thinks is, well, what does emotional intelligence mean to you? So if you can just click in your vote there. Is it A, self-awareness and regulation, motivation, empathy, or good social skills? Which one do you think? I will move on to the next slide. Okay, that's good. Kind of a splattering of backgrounds. No one thinks in motivation, but all the other ones, it's a mix. The right answer is actually all of them. Emotional intelligence covers all of these things in one go. So a good range of different answers there, but most importantly, social skills, then empathy and self-awareness. Okay, great. So we'll be covering a lot of these in the talk today. Now, there's some background on me there. I'm an Agile coach and worked with lots of different organizations, public, private, startup, big ones, some of them there. Came across Level 3 from my work with Unilever. Also an authorized facilitator for IC Agile, which is one of the biggest certification bodies for Agile in the world. What does an Agile coach do? Well, what we do is we help organizations look at the way they work. So that's quite broad, from working with teams to individuals to looking at the actual process. Okay, so I will close that poll and we'll move on. Okay, so our agenda today, just a little recap on what we talked about last week, because it feeds into what we will be talking about today. We have leading in the age of the knowledge economy and why the structure of economies has changed and we've become knowledge economies, and why the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership is so important. We'll talk then about why leadership in knowledge economy is different. Why is it different than before? And we'll split the course into, when I talk about emotional intelligence, I talk about 2 different. One is the internal aspects of emotional intelligence. That is understanding yourself. We can't go out there and start trying to be emotional intelligent with other people when we don't really have it within ourselves. So it starts with the inside, and then we're going to talk about agility in relationships. That is emotional intelligence going outwards, how we deal with other people. And then we're going to have a Q&A session and some takeaways after that. Now, throughout the talk, the chat is always open, but I'd like people to put in some Q&A as well, and we'll get to them at the end. So if something pops up that we're talking about, please feel free to pop it into the Q&A there. It makes it more enjoyable for me. We have a number of polls throughout as well to keep people engaged. Okay, so recapping on last week, we talked that what is Agile, what does it mean? A lot of people come to Agile down in these bottom two, the gray and the orange down the bottom, the highly visible part of Agile. The frameworks like Scrum and stand-ups and user stories, they're important, but they're actually only a small part of Agile. The bigger bit is the more intangible aspects, which actually are the most powerful. That's when we're talking about principles, values, and mindset. We call it being Agile. And then we talk about the practices and tools of doing Agile. Again, I'll repeat, the doing Agile is the most obvious ones, and a lot of people jump straight into doing Agile without really changing or transforming their principles, values, or mindset, or the organizational principles, values, and mindset. Okay, so again, a recap, just saying how economies have changed, and we've moved from the Taylor and Ford days of people being resources, all the way up to today, where we really employ people not for their brawn or what they do with their hands, but more what they do with their minds. So it's minds over scale. Lots of examples of really small companies making really big disruptions in industries. We talk about the rhythm of innovation. We talked about the ability to learn is valued. So the idea of being humble enough to say things will change and I need to learn new things. And the ability, we talked about the importance of experiment and agility. And then we talked about leadership inspires knowledge workers differently than before. And we went into the intrinsic motivators. So what does that sum up? That sums up that modern workers are different than before, and often management practices are still relying on the old command and control when workers themselves have changed. They're much more educated, more intelligent, and it's a different type of management. It's more leadership than management. The workplace social contract is different as well nowadays, so it's not there's less power in the organization, and it's evolved to a new type of relationship between employees and organizations. And then the importance of the team in handling complexity. So big problems or complex problems are solved by teams, not by individuals. So this all plays into the idea of the importance of the team. And we discussed last week about the cross-functional team, not the team that's siloed in its area in HR or marketing or sales or development, but cross-functional teams where the team is put together with people with capabilities from different parts of the organizations. And then we looked into the evolution. On the right, we have the traditional hierarchy with the elites up top, middle management as the enforcers in between, and then everyone else down the bottom of the chain. Nowadays is more like the organizational on the left, which is more like the organization as a organism. And we talk about the word holacracy, which means, leadership is distributed. We still need leadership, we still need management, but it's more distributed between people instead of residing in a small bunch of elites. We talked about and then there's the role of individuals within the team, within those circles, and then you have the contributors, the role of the contributors, or the individual contributors. Understanding power and influence. So rather than power being vested in a title, we have flatter organizations, and it's more about the ability to influence others. And we understanding the appropriate style and power of influence. So understanding the situational factors, and we talked last week about understanding when it's good to be authoritative, when it's good to be supportive, when it's good to be more of a a coach rather than a mentor. Understanding the timing. So it's the rise of the soft skills in leadership. So win the hearts and minds. And that brought us up to the idea of the agile leader being less of directing their attention at the individuals and more at looking at what we call system thinking and thinking about creating the right environment for people to flourish. And I like this analogy of the gardener. And the gardener, he doesn't really look at the seeds. He looks at the soil. He looks at the amount of sunshine. He looks at the amount of water. And each flower is different. Some like more sunshine, some like more rain. And the idea of getting the environment right and right for individuals. And then we talk about the idea of theory X and theory Y. And agile organizations are more on the right towards theory Y, that we believe that people are awesome, people have potential, that people like to work, that people need find purpose in working. And this will bring us up to just about where we finished last week, which was the idea of leadership is more about nurturing a team, giving it purpose, and creating what we call psychological safety or trust. Okay, so beginning of what we're going to talk about today, and we are going to talk about the inward emotional intelligence, or developing the self as an instrument. So this is looking inside and developing our own skills. Now, before we start this, I am going to just run a little poll. Just get up the polls here. Now, what we're talking about in this poll is that often learning development or organizations, they focus on competency-based skills. They're important. They're Excel skills. They could be coding skills. They're the competence-based skills. However, often what's lacking is the emotional support skills, the relationship skills, the developing your individual skills. So it's always interesting to find out what organizations are doing. So we've got plenty of answers in here. So competency-based skills only, 44%, mainly competency, another 20%, and then we have the outlier of 32, a balance between competency and emotional skills. Okay, that's good. So obviously when we talk about the importance of emotional intelligence, we're erring towards, we're saying that organizations need to have a balance. And we look later on of the importance of emotional intelligence and what kind of programs organizations can have to help to build emotional intelligence in their within their employees. Okay, so what is developing the self as an instrument? So it's our ability to learn new things, to continually develop oneself. So it's a mental and emotional growth continues as an adult. So often we go into a job and a lot of the focus is on the competency-based skills, and we don't get time to develop the emotional side. Often there's a mindset belief that I don't grow any. So you can grow your competency skills, or you concentrate that, and you don't really evolve your emotional skills. So we call them vertical growth. So that's emotional skills, and horizontal growth, and it can be outweighed. So we try to keep an eye on that, because if we're growing our leadership skills, emotional intelligence is so important. So we think our thinking, beliefs, and feelings can grow to a higher level, but our behaviors from a leadership perspective in teamwork, conversations, and ability to lead can remain at a lower level. Okay, so that. Okay, EQ, social intelligence, and the intrapersonal. So the awareness and ability to regulate our emotional responsiveness. So this is looking within ourselves and understanding. Often we're an emotional beast, and we react immediately. We let our emotions take over. There's a famous book called the chimp paradox, where it has an analogy that within everyone is a chimp and a person, and the chimp is the one who reacts on emotion. The chimp is stronger than the man, and the man is the one who acts rationally. But often when we're faced with pressure, or we're put in a situation where there's either fear, anxiety, or anger, the chimp comes out and we react emotionally. And the crux of the story is that we have to train our chimp, that we understand what situations make us react in what ways, and that we develop strategies for dealing with that understanding that we are in a stressful situation, learning from how we reacted before, and was that reaction, did we get the kind of result before when we reacted emotionally, and would we have reacted differently? So it's about learning when we're in stressful situations and having strategies to deal with it that gets us the kind of outcome that we want. Okay. We talk about the self-awareness of the behaviors we default to. So what behaviors do we default to? Is it dominance? Is it arrogance? Is it something else that does not give us the result, or the outcome that is the most positive? These are deep-seated, ingrained, and people can go through their whole life without actually understanding these, and they still default back to their original behaviors. We look at the idea of self-regulation refers to the ability to react not purely from emotion, but from a leadership stance. So we try to extract our personal default behaviors and look from a leadership point of view, what's needed in this situation. Okay, and in times of crisis, people look towards leaders for reactions. So even with the recent COVID, it's how have our leaders reacted? Have they defaulted? Because there's a lot of panic. There's a lot of people not sure what's going on. But how do we react as leaders when a situation happens? How have we reacted before, and what can we learn from that? And how can we take those learnings? When we're coaching leaders, we talk about bringing them back to a situation, trying to walk them through. It's like a mini retro, the retros we use in Agile teams. It's like a personal retro. So we take time out afterwards and we talk through what were the trigger points for these emotions? How did we react then? What was the results of that? And what could we have done differently? So it's taking time out for a personal retro after a stressful situation, then taking that learning and putting it in somewhere at the back that we can use it as a playbook next time to say, well, I reacted emotionally that time. It didn't work out that well. And this is what I learned from it. And this might be I've had time to think through it. And here's a better strategy that I could use next time. Okay, we've got some questions coming in. So we'll just take a minute to look through these. So how can we, and we've got some, you can upvote questions as well. If you can't think of a question now, you can go into the Q&A and check out the others and upvote ones you liked. So we've one then, how can we control our emotions while coaching teams remotely? It's a good question. Again, it's taking time out away from the project and saying, well, this is a time for us to talk about how we're feeling, how do we react in that situation? Just giving people the time to talk about it, and also giving them the authority or giving them clearance that we're going to take time out away from the project to talk about how we're reacting, and a little bit of coaching. If you're a leader, we're doing a little bit of coaching, and we're not trying to say this is the way you should react. It's more about teaching people to say, well, how did you feel about that? Could you have done it any better? Get them to come to their own understanding of it and coming up to their own solution or their own way of that, how they might handle it in the future. So the next one then is one from Claire, is how can Agile concretely work for an MNC, so a multinational corporation? Remember, we talked last week about Agile being quite a big thing. It means many things. Some people come to that it's very much about practice, but we explained it at the beginning that it's so much more than that. It's more of a mindset. But if you look at some of the, what means something to me, where I understand that Agile is something that is working is that they say technology is eating the world, or software is eating the world. I would say agility is eating the world. If you look at the makeup of the S&P 500, somewhere around, for about 80 years, it was pretty much the same organizations, the GEs and the other big ones, the Dow Chemicals, the railways, all those are the big ones. But something happened around the turn of the millennium, a little bit after that, is that the S&P was not being made up by those big old giants. They were being disrupted by these new types of organizations who were rapidly finding their place in there. We're talking, I'm going to say the Facebooks and Googles, and it's all the other ones, the ones that were agile enough to take advantage of the change that was going on. Not just the technology, but everything else, the change in the globalization, the change in social-cultural changes, all these things. And those guys were the ones that were making up the bulk of the S&P 500. So for an MNC to change, it's harder. Smaller companies are naturally more agile because they're smaller. It's easier to make change, and it's quite literally a lot of them live month to month, so they have to change. It's right there. MNCs are harder, but some of them are changing. If you look at, I would say start with the culture and then work your way down to the doings. And there's great examples of organizations that have changed. Microsoft, for example, that massive changes going on in culture, but massive changes going on in the products they offer. They moving away from buying your software in big enterprise license agreements to buying it on the cloud. So they're moving to the cloud. So that was a huge change. So MNCs. It's harder to change, but it is possible, and it's actually becoming a necessity to change. Another question: how can coaches handle leadership teams' emotions to make a successful organization? That's quite a big question. I'll leave that to the end. And another one just came in: the books you recommend to read to implement agile leaders with real implementation references, examples inside. Okay, so what I can do is I can post some examples of some books afterwards to ones to talk about agile leadership. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in a couple of those questions and we will move on. So again, looking inwards, we look at the idea of mindfulness, taking time out, the ability to focus in the present. So being able to, with everything going around, there's so much clutter, there's so much urgency that sometimes we miss the important. So taking time out to be present, to be able to distill down to what is the most important right now. So everything going on right around you right now and distilling it down to what is the most important. So we want to build this type of clarity that that's not emotionally driven, that helps to magnify our effectiveness. So some of the best leaders, they're able to take in all this clutter. They know when to delegate. They know what's important. They know what will if there's clear scorecards, they know what's there, and they're able to shift through it. And they got this this clarity of thinking. So we look at the slide down there. Self-awareness leads to emotional balance. Talk about social awareness, what's going on around us, and not just the obvious stuff, but some of the underlying social currents that are going on within an organization. Relationship management and then self-awareness. So I talk about in an example with Apple. They have a role on Teams called a stitcher, and a stitcher is someone who's high EQ, the score we give to emotional intelligence, and these people are able to pick up on when there is human stress within a team, and they're able to diffuse that. Okay, so how do we go about affecting personal growth? How do we go about working on our inward EQ? Or inward emotional intelligence. So first of all, we have to believe that change is possible, that you're not born with a certain level of emotional intelligence and it stays the same ever, that you can work on it and that you can grow. And we talk about examining and deliberately choosing our thoughts, our feelings and behaviors. Know that we can develop new mental and emotional capabilities if we call upon our full selves, and then design in time for reflection and learning with the personal retro. And this, I'm talking about doing it for yourself, that we take a situation, we take often people go meeting to meeting to meeting, and they have something, something that upset them, something that didn't go so right in a meeting, and then they internalize it and they just go straight to another meeting, and that sits in the back there. Didn't take time out for a little learning, or even just to write it down and think about it later on. That's the same that we can. That's the same of what we do with teams. Is giving teams a bit of a breather out. We call it the retro, but it's taking time out, but looking at the emotional side of the retro, not just how we worked, but thinking about the emotional side of how we worked. So growth mindset is a critical aspect for agile leadership, both personally and as a role model. So if we believe as a leader, as a agile leader, that personal growth is possible, it filters down to people on our team that this is something that's important. Okay. Any other questions coming in? Okay. Okay. Any questions on that, on the inward side? I know we're going through it quite quick. These are usually a day or two workshops. We're getting into this, so we're going through quite quickly, and I could be skipping a few bits. Anyone add anything into that? Because we're going to move now from the personal side of emotional intelligence, and we're going to look at what we call agility in relationships. So it's looking at the social side, the interpersonal side. Okay. No other questions? Okay. So agility in relationships. So if organizations are changed to be more team-based, that they are flatter, that employees and team members are more educated, are used to a new type of world, a social culture world where it's more about teamwork, it's more about collaboration. We are changing away from the old type boss of command and control. But so the boss changes, but also the worker changes. That the change in, so we do not come to work just to be told what to do. We come to work because we have a valid opinion, that we want to be involved in decision making. So emotional intelligence in relationships. So emotional intelligence in relationships refers to an individual's social awareness and the relationship management. So being able to handle ourselves in certain social contexts, and also where we place ourselves and the value we put into the relationships we have in the workplace. So it can traditionally people go, it's the ability to empathize with another. But what does empathizing with another mean? It's giving time to listen. It's maybe in the chat, or people can put in a few ideas of what does emotional intelligence in the social context mean to them. What does empathy mean? Okay, I know some of you are eating your lunch. It's hard to type. I guess the polls are easier too. Okay, I'm just going to launch one of the polls here. Maybe it's easier to do a poll than to do. I'll close that other one, and the new poll. I believe that making time for emotional growth will make me a better leader in the workplace.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, it's pretty much it's a one-horse race. So I think I'm somewhat agree. Okay, it's one somewhat agree. Okay, so numbers are shooting up for agree. So emotional growth will help me Okay. Okay, that's good to see. No one disagrees. Okay, so the ability to empathize with others, the ability to put your, stand in their shoes, to listen to their view, to understand their context as well. That there's things not just with the immediate problem that's influencing, that there's dependencies beyond the immediate interaction we're taking here that is influencing the way they feel or the way they think or the way they're acting in this situation. It's the obvious things about listening, giving people time to listen, but feeding off of that, if we're developing a team as an Agile leader, it's ensuring people have the right skills to express themselves. Now, that can come from coaching, that can come from training, that can come from giving people time, and helping to develop our teams, that maybe their ability to inquire by having an open door, by allowing people, not people to block up the system with lots of questions, but training them to act, or encouraging them to distill their questions or their inquiries, that it's something that is constructive. The ability to interact with another on the basis of what could best serve the other. Okay, there's a summary of empathy. So rather than react on our emotions, are based on the relationship we have with the other, or our habitual behavior. Okay, so it's a little thing there about I like it. It kind of summarizes up a leader, that often it's the IQ is something that's on show, but it's the EQ that's something underneath that's quite important. And some of the best leaders I've seen in we call it in modern organizations, they're quite strong on the EQ, even more so than on the IQ. IQ is always important, but a little bit more EQ. Okay. Again, I encourage any more questions. If you want to throw down some more questions, that would be great. We have, okay, so one of the tips here that talk about is the idea of, in Agile organizations, it's less about broadcasting instructions. It's more about conversations, two-way conversations. Okay. Traditional management conversations were one way. Conversations are the primary method of communication of Agile leaders. So it's taking time to sit down and having little conversations. They're like mini coaching sessions with people. So developing conversations into two-way coaching sessions. So the tips are practice advocacy and inquiry skills. So that is developing your, as a leader's, advocacy and your inquiring skills, your ability to sell the idea, the ability to get people on board, to influence them. And we all know that, if we can get people to contribute to an idea, that means that they're vested in the success of that idea because they feel they've ownership of that idea. So getting other people involved in creating the idea in the first place. And inquiry skills, so that where people are able to ask the right questions. It's amazing. I've worked on lots of projects, and when we do the postmortems of the ones that go wrong, we're saying, well, why didn't anyone ask that question at the beginning? Now, maybe they didn't know, maybe we didn't have the capability, but in fact, a lot of it came down to we didn't have the right inquiry skills. And if you get a good team, they're able to move much quicker when they are able to ask the right questions right from the beginning, that we don't discover them later on when they're much more costly. An Agile leader expects diversity of opinion that people will have, and that's good and that's healthy, and we frame it as a meeting of minds rather than everyone's in, here's what we're going to do, and we move on. So we want people coming in, often the wisdom of the crowd we talk about. So we frame invitations rather than issuing demands. So we questions, we encourage people to have clarifying questions. There's nothing worse than working on where people, did you understand? Do you have, yes, I did, and they're gone. And then something goes wrong later on, and it was clear that they didn't. So we're saying better err on the side early of clarifying questions. So the ability to, often people, particularly if they're junior, are afraid to ask questions because it might show that it might seem that they don't understand. So we want to encourage people to say, ask some clarifying questions. Ask me to explain with an example, or ask me to reframe how I'm of what I want in another way. And I always like to say, give me some acceptance criteria. What does success look like? So we're asking people to ask those questions on our team. We talk about provocative questions that they push it a little. What would happen if? Have we accounted for this type of situation going wrong? Everyone likes to talk about the happy day, but often we have to look at the alternative paths that when things might go wrong and how we're going to deal with that. And then deepening discussion. That term that's going around at the moment is, let's unpack this a little further. So we know when we need to keep the conversations high and we keep them low. So this is all about being able to get agility into conversations so that we have better conversations, that we're clarifying, encouraging, supporting, deepening the conversation. That's a great skill set for a team to have, or a leader to have, and for their team to have as well. Okay, so that was the quick, and we're just about on time, so we have time for some Q&A. So if anybody wants to jump in with some questions, feel free. I still have a poll left, so I'll launch the poll. And let me know what you think. I'm just going to close that one. Okay, so there's a question in there about, is there any recommending techniques to practice improving questioning skills? Okay, recommending techniques to practice improving questioning skills. Well, the question I like people to ask is, accept anything around clarifying the acceptance. Often we have this, there's a mismatch between the two, and we someone tells us something and we take it away and we have our version of it, but we need to clarify this. So often if you in Agile, we use the user story cards, and as a X I want Y because of B, this thing here. But if you flick around the back, it should have some clear acceptance criteria. What does success look like from a business point of view? What happens if it doesn't reach success? What are the alternative paths to that? So getting people to ask acceptance criteria is key. Okay, let me just go back to the poll and then go to the Q&A. Okay, great. So everyone thinks EQ is something that can be worked on and it can be developed. And even though we all have the chimp and we all have the man inside us, and you can never get rid of the chimp and become completely rational, we can learn to train that chimp. Okay, so back to the Q&A. So that's great. Lots of questions coming in now. Okay, we're back to that one about what books would you recommend to read to implement Agile for leaders? Examples referenced. Well, if anyone has any recommendations, jump into it. I like Barry O'Reilly's Unlearn book. I think that explains nice things about that we've learned certain things. We all have our default way of doing things, and we learn new ways, but sometimes we have to let go of the old ways. So the ability to unlearn is important, both for an individual and for a team, that we need to forget about some of the old ways, or else they just keep surfacing back up. If you're looking at actually implementing the doing of Agile, something like the Scrum Guide is good, and it talks a little bit about the leadership qualities as well. Okay, has it been proven that Agile leadership, so developing EQ, have a real impact on team productivity? Okay, so has it? Well, I don't have any statistical surveys, but just from observation, yeah. So some of the best teams out there are led by people who have very good EQ, or if you find that there is someone on the team who's good EQ, the idea of the synergy of a team working together is better than the individuals working together. How much of this underscores the significance and value of organizational and leadership development? Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's big companies. Well, they spend a fortune on this. The idea on leadership development, developing the next leaders. Yeah, there's a lot of merit to that. Any other questions? What are we've done that one. Oh yeah, sorry. What are the roadblocks for an MNC context to build resilience and empathetic leaders? Okay, well, one of the biggest things I come across in the MNCs is there's an over focus on the urgent and not enough focus on the importance. So everyone's frantically busy trying to hit their quarterly or their monthly targets, and they just don't have, there isn't much time to give into the important. There's a bit, but not enough. Often people are, they're too busy, and often it's up to leadership to recognize this and to build into the runtime time to look at the urgent's important too, but time to look at the important too. Okay, so important obviously has a longer time span, but often leadership is too focused on the immediate and the short term, and we're not focusing enough. We're not taking part of that time and looking at, you know, the 2, 3, 4, 5 year horizon. I'm talking from a group. I'm sure there's someone in MNCs in strategic who's looking there, but there's not much looking from a team point of view on the longer term. Okay. And and I think that's pretty. If there's any, if I've missed any questions, just pop it in there again. I'll see it. Okay. Oh, someone can move them to answered. Okay, I think Zara is moving the ones. Okay, and there's 2 left in there. So, what do you hope leaders for a post-COVID world? Oh, that's a really interesting question about the hope for leadership. Where does leadership go after this? There's a really interesting model called the Cynefin model. And if you look it up, Cynefin, Cynefin, and it talks about leadership styles or reactions in certain contexts. And I would, if anyone's time, take a look at that. But what do you hope for leaders in the post-COVID world? That we build, resilience. We look at. I think organizations will, it will increase the push towards agility, because the organizations that are winning this crisis are the ones who've been able to adapt. So, putting a little bit more emphasis in developing that ability to within the organization, or business agility to adapt. I think there's going to be a lot of change after the COVID, but building in more agility, I think, will be one of them. Okay, on that, I think we'll be calling it to an end. It's been a quick. It's only a quick 45 minutes, so we covered quite a lot from quite a high level. I'm sure people have lots of questions. Feel free to email me or grab me for a cup of coffee when level 3 finally opens up to us all meeting up again. And with that, I will sign off, and I hope it's been some way interesting. And thank all the guys in level 3. And yeah, okay, thank you.